Valith had lived for 400 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species discover fire and others burn themselves to extinction. In all that time, he had learned one truth above all others. The galaxy was predictable. Every species followed patterns. Every civilization made the same mistakes. Nothing ever truly surprised him anymore. Then he met the humans. The assignment came from the Corvani, high command on a cold morning aboard the diplomatic vessel Ascending Light. Valith read the orders twice, certain there had been some error. They wanted him to observe humans in combat. They wanted his professional opinion on whether this young species deserved membership in the Galactic Accord. Valith almost laughed. He had read the reports on humanity. They lived for barely a century. Their bodies were soft and fragile, with no natural armor, no venom, no telepathy. They could not see in the dark. They could not breathe underwater. They were, by every measure the Corvani used, utterly unremarkable. But the High Command insisted. Humanity had been making noise in the outer territories. They had colonies on 40 worlds now, and their population was growing faster than anyone had predicted. Some members of the Accord were nervous. Others were curious. All of them wanted to know what humans were truly capable of. So Valith packed his things and transferred to a human warship called the Defiance. The ship was small. Valith had served on Corvani destroyers that could have carried the Defiance in their cargo holds. The corridors were narrow, the ceilings low, and everything smelled faintly of recycled air and coffee. A bitter drink the humans seemed to worship. Commander Jake Harris met him at the airlock. The human was in his middle years, with gray appearing at his temples and lines around his eyes. He shook Valith's hand with a grip that was firm but not aggressive, and he smiled like they were old friends. "Welcome aboard," Harris said. "I hope the quarters are comfortable enough. We're not used to hosting Corvani observers." Valith found the quarters adequate, if cramped. He spent the first day reviewing the mission parameters. The Drakshar Collective had invaded a world called Malo 7, slaughtering the colony there. A joint fleet had been assembled to drive them out. The humans were contributing 4 ships to the effort. The Corvani were contributing 12. It should have been a simple operation. The Drakshar were brutal, but not particularly clever. Their technology was inferior to both Corvani and human systems. Victory seemed assured. Valith attended the command briefings and watched the human officers interact. Lieutenant Kate Murphy ran tactical operations, a young woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She argued with Harris openly, questioning his decisions, and Harris listened to her criticisms without anger. Valith found this strange. In Corvani military culture, subordinates did not challenge their commanders. Chief Engineer Ben Torres kept the ship running. He was a large man with thick arms and grease permanently embedded under his fingernails. He spoke to the ship's engines like they were living creatures, coaxing them to perform beyond their specifications. Valith heard him whisper to the reactor core one night, promising it rest after the battle if it gave him just a little more power now. These humans were odd. Valith made notes, but drew no conclusions. The fleet gathered at the edge of the Malo system. 16 ships in total, arranged in standard defensive formation. Admiral Silurith commanded from his flagship, the Corvani dreadnought Eternal Vigilance. His voice crackled over the communications channel as he outlined the battle plan. Then the Drakshar arrived. They came out of hyperspace like a swarm of insects, ship after ship after ship. Intelligence had predicted 50 vessels. Valith counted 160 before he stopped counting. The enemy fleet was 3 times larger than anyone had expected. Admiral Silurith's voice returned to the channel, and this time it carried fear. "All ships, execute emergency retreat. I repeat, all ships retreat to the fallback position." We cannot engage a force of this size. The Kovanni ships began to turn. Their engines flared as they prepared to flee. The Defiance did not move. Valeth watched Commander Harris stare at the tactical display. The man's face showed no fear. His hands did not shake. He simply looked at the overwhelming enemy force like it was a problem to be solved rather than a death sentence to be avoided. "Commander," Lieutenant Murphy said quietly, "the Admiral has ordered a retreat." I heard him. "Sir, we cannot fight that fleet alone." Harris turned to look at her. "There are 17 colonists still alive on the surface. They sent the distress signal 6 hours ago. They're hiding in a bunker near the southern settlement." Murphy's expression changed. 17 people. 17 people, Harris agreed. Mothers, fathers, children. They're down there right now, listening to Drakshar patrols search for them, praying someone will come. Valeth stepped forward. "Commander, I must advise against this course of action. 17 lives cannot justify the loss of a warship and its crew. The mathematics are clear." Harris looked at him. There was something in the human's eyes that Valeth had never seen before. It was not anger. It was not pride. It was something deeper, something ancient. "The mathematics," Harris repeated. "You want me to calculate the value of 17 souls against the value of this ship. It is the logical approach." Harris shook his head slowly. "You know what I love about humans, Valeth? We're terrible at math." He turned to his crew. Every officer on the bridge was watching him. They all knew what staying meant. They all knew the odds. "Anyone who wants to leave can take an escape pod," Harris said. "No shame in it. No judgment. But I'm taking this ship down to that planet, and I'm bringing those people home." No one moved toward the escape pods. Lieutenant Murphy smiled and turned back to her console. "Plotting attack vector now, sir." Torres's voice came over the intercom. "Engines are ready, Commander. Let's go get our people." 3 other human ships broke formation to join the Defiance. The Kovanni fleet continued its retreat, disappearing into hyperspace one by one until only the 4 human vessels remained. Valeth stood frozen on the bridge, watching the impossible happen. 4 small ships against 160. 200 humans against an army of monsters. Commander Harris settled into his chair and looked at the enemy fleet. "All hands," he said calmly. "Battle stations." The stars filled with fire, and the humans flew straight into it. The first Drakshar missiles struck the Defiance within minutes of the battle beginning. The ship shook so hard that Valeth lost his footing and crashed against the wall. Warning lights flashed across every console. Somewhere deep in the vessel, metal screamed as it twisted under pressure. The humans did not panic. Lieutenant Murphy called out damage reports in a steady voice while her fingers danced across the tactical controls. Commander Harris issued orders with the calm of someone discussing dinner plans. When a second volley of missiles approached, he simply said, "Evasive pattern Delta," and the ship rolled sideways. Dodging most of the incoming fire, Valeth pulled himself upright and watched the battle unfold on the main display. The 4 human ships moved through the Drakshar fleet like small fish swimming through a school of predators. They should have been destroyed immediately. Instead, they were surviving. More than surviving. They were fighting back. The Defiance fired its main cannons at a Drakshar cruiser, punching through its shields and detonating something vital inside. The enemy ship broke apart in a bloom of orange flame. Another human vessel, the Resolute, swooped beneath a destroyer and unleashed a spread of torpedoes into its unprotected belly. The Drakshar were larger and more numerous, but the humans were faster. They were unpredictable. They took risks that no Kovanni commander would ever consider. "They're adapting," Murphy reported. "Enemy formation is shifting to contain us." Harris nodded. "Then we shift too. Signal the fleet. Diamond formation, focused assault on their command ship. "Sir, that puts us directly in their kill zone." "I know." Harris glanced at her. "You have a better idea?" Murphy thought for exactly 2 seconds. "No, sir. Diamond formation it is." The 4 human ships regrouped and drove straight toward the heart of the Drakshar fleet. Valith watched the tactical display and saw the enemy vessels closing around them like a fist. This was suicide. This was madness. This was exactly what the humans wanted. The Drakshar command ship opened fire with everything it had. The space around the Defiance lit up with weapons fire. Shields failed. Hull breaches appeared on 3 decks. The lights flickered as power systems struggled to keep up. A young officer fell from her station, blood running from a cut on her forehead. She hit the ground, dazed, then immediately climbed back into her chair and continued working. Valith stared at her. "You are injured." "I noticed," she said without looking at him. "I'll deal with it after we win." The Defiance reached the command ship and unleashed everything it had. Missiles, cannons, even the point defense systems were turned against the massive vessel's hull. The other human ships did the same, concentrating their fire on a single point. The Drakshar command ship exploded. For a moment, the enemy fleet hesitated. Their coordination faltered. Harris saw the opening immediately. "All ships, break for the planet. Now." The Defiance dove toward Malo 7, its engines burning at maximum power. The Drakshar tried to pursue, but they were scattered and confused without their command ship directing them. 2 human vessels fell back to cover the retreat, taking hit after hit while the Defiance and 1 other ship raced for the atmosphere. Valith felt the ship shudder as they entered the planet's upper atmosphere. Fire wrapped around the viewports. The hull groaned under the stress of a combat descent, something the ship was never designed to do. "Torres," Harris said into the intercom, "I need everything you've got." The engineer's voice came back strained but determined. "She's giving you everything, Commander. Just get us down in one piece, and I'll put her back together." They broke through the clouds and saw the surface of Malo 7 for the first time. It had been a beautiful world once. Now it was scarred with craters and burning cities. The colony's main settlement was nothing but rubble. Smoke rose from 1,000 fires. Murphy identified the bunker where the survivors were hiding. It was 3 kilometers from the nearest safe landing zone, surrounded by Drakshar ground forces. "I count 200 enemy soldiers between us and the bunker," she reported. "Heavy weapons. Armored vehicles. They know someone's down there." Harris turned to the Marine commander, Corporal Danny Reeves, who had been waiting silently at the back of the bridge. Reeves was a solid man with kind eyes and hands built for violence. "Can you get through?" Harris asked. Reeves looked at the display. He studied the enemy positions, the terrain, the distances involved. Then he smiled. "We'll get through, sir. Or we'll die trying." "That's not much of a plan, Corporal." "No, sir. But it's the only one we've got." The Defiance landed hard in a clearing a kilometer from the bunker. The boarding ramp dropped, and 30 Marines poured out into the smoke-filled air. Valith followed them, though he did not know why. Something pulled him forward. He needed to see this through. The Drakshar were waiting for them. The first firefight erupted within minutes of leaving the ship. Energy beams screamed through the air. Explosions threw dirt and debris in every direction. A Marine fell, clutching his leg. 2 of his companions grabbed him and kept moving, carrying him between them without slowing down. Valith had seen many battles in his 4 centuries of life. He had watched armies clash and fleets burn. But he had never seen anything like this. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to protect. They moved as a unit, covering each other, communicating with glances and gestures that needed no words. When one fell, the others closed the gap. When the enemy pushed, the humans pushed back harder. Corporal Reeves led from the front, his rifle never still. He killed 6 Drakshar in the first engagement alone. But it was not his skill that impressed Valeth. It was his face. The man was terrified. Valeth could see it in his eyes, in the tension of his jaw. He was terrified, and he kept fighting anyway. They reached the bunker's outer perimeter as the sun began to set. The Drakshar had fortified the area with barricades and gun emplacements. There was no way through without taking heavy losses. Reeves called his squad together. I need volunteers to draw their fire. Give the rest of us a chance to flank. Every hand went up. Reeves laughed, though there was no humor in it. Of course you all volunteer. Fine. First squad, you're with me. Everyone else, wait for the opening. Valeth grabbed Reeves's arm. This is madness. You will die. Reeves looked at him with those terrified, determined eyes. Maybe, but those people in that bunker won't. He pulled free and led his squad toward the enemy line. The Drakshar opened fire. The humans charged, and somewhere in that bunker, 17 strangers heard the sound of rescue coming. The bunker door was 3 feet of solid metal, designed to survive orbital bombardment. When it finally opened, Valeth saw the faces of the survivors for the first time. They were dirty, exhausted, and hollow-eyed from days of terror. But they were alive. 17 humans huddled in the darkness. Elderly couples holding each other. A pregnant woman with her arms wrapped protectively around her belly. And 2 children, a girl of 9 and a boy of 12, pressed against their mother's sides. The girl's name was Layla. The boy was Max. Valeth learned their names because Sergeant Amy Cole knelt down to their level and introduced herself like they were meeting at a party instead of a war. "Zone. Hey there," Cole said softly. "I'm Amy. We're gonna get you out of here, okay?" Layla's eyes were wide with fear. "The monsters are outside." "I know. But we're scarier than they are." Cole smiled, and somehow the expression made her scarred face look gentle. "You just stay close to me. Can you do that?" The children nodded. Cole stood and turned to her squad. The woman had been fighting for 2 decades. Her body was a map of old wounds, burns and blade marks, and one long scar that ran from her ear to her collarbone. She should have retired years ago. Instead, she was here on a burning planet, surrounded by enemies. "We move in 5 minutes," she announced. "Medic, check the wounded. Everyone else, reload and hydrate. It's going to be a long walk back." Chris Vance, the combat medic, moved through the survivors with quick efficiency. He checked pulses, examined wounds, and handed out water packets from his kit. When he reached the pregnant woman, he spent extra time making sure she was stable. "How far along?" he asked. 7 months, she whispered. Vance nodded. "You're going to be fine. Both of you. I promise." It was a promise he had no right to make. They all knew it. But the woman smiled anyway, and some of the fear left her eyes. Valeth watched these interactions with growing confusion. The humans were in terrible danger. The Drakshar had regrouped outside, and their numbers were growing. The extraction zone was compromised. There was no clear path to safety. And yet the humans were not afraid. Or rather, they were afraid, but they acted as if they were not. They joked with each other. They comforted the civilians. They checked their weapons with steady hands. Cole approached Valeth. "You should stay in the middle of the formation. We'll protect you." "I am not one of your people," Valeth said. "You owe me nothing." Cole raised an eyebrow. "You're with us. That makes you one of ours." She walked away before he could respond. The squad moved out as darkness fell. The ruins of the colony provided some cover, but the Drakshar were everywhere. Patrols moved through the streets, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Searchlights swept across the rubble. Cole led them through the shadows, finding paths where none seemed to exist. She communicated with hand signals, directing her squad with silent precision. The civilians followed in the center, surrounded by Marines on all sides. They made it 300 meters before the first contact. A Drakshar patrol stumbled onto their position. The lead alien had just enough time to raise its weapon before Corporal Reeves put 2 rounds through its skull. The others died seconds later, cut down by silent, coordinated fire. But the damage was done. Somewhere in the darkness, an alarm began to wail. "Move," Cole ordered. "Now." They ran. The civilians struggled to keep up, but the Marines helped them. One soldier carried an elderly man on his back. Another supported the pregnant woman, matching his pace to hers. No one was left behind. The Drakshar closed in from all directions. Firefights erupted every few minutes. The humans fought through each one, leaving alien bodies in their wake. Valith found himself next to Medic Vance during a brief pause in the running battle. The human was breathing hard, and there was blood on his uniform. Not all of it belonged to others. "You are wounded," Valith observed. Vance glanced at his side, where a deep gash oozed crimson. "Just a scratch. I've had worse." "That is a significant injury. You need treatment. The civilians need treatment more." Vance checked his medical kit. "I've got 3 doses of painkiller left. Those go to the people who can't fight through the pain." "And what about your pain?" Vance smiled grimly. "I'll fight through it." They reached the edge of the colony as the Drakshar caught up with them. The extraction zone was visible in the distance, a flat clearing where the Defiants waited with engines running. But between them and safety stood a wall of alien soldiers, and behind those soldiers stood something worse. The Drakshar warlord Kethfall emerged from the darkness like a nightmare given form. He was 7 feet tall, covered in bone-like armor plates that grew from his own body. His eyes burned with cruel intelligence. In his hands, he carried a blade as long as Valith was tall. Cole assessed the situation in seconds. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and exhausted. The civilians could not fight. Half her squad was wounded. There was no way through. She turned to her people. "We hold here. Buy time for the civilians to reach the ship." "Sarge," Reeves said quietly, "we won't survive that." "No?" Cole loaded a fresh magazine into her rifle. "We probably won't." No one argued. No one ran. The Marines formed a defensive line in front of the civilians and prepared to die. Valith stepped forward. "This is not necessary. I can surrender myself. I am a Corvani observer. I have value as a hostage. Perhaps they will negotiate." Cole looked at him with something like affection. "That's kind of you. But we don't leave people behind. Even Corvani people. I am not one of yours. You are now." Medic Vance suddenly stumbled, his face going pale. The wound in his side had opened further, and blood was pooling at his feet. He dropped to one knee, then forced himself upright again. "Chris," Cole said sharply, "I'm fine." He was clearly not fine. But he turned to the wounded civilians and continued giving instructions, his voice steady even as his body failed. "Keep pressure on that bandage. Breathe slowly. You're going to be okay." Lila, the little girl, was crying silently. Her brother Max held her hand, trying to be brave. Cole knelt beside them one more time. "Remember what I said? Stay close to me." "The monsters," Lila whispered. "There are so many." Cole touched her cheek gently. "I know, sweetheart. But you know what's stronger than monsters?" "What?" Cole stood and faced the approaching enemy. The warlord was coming. His army was coming. Death itself was coming. She raised her rifle and smiled. "People who love you." The Drakshar attacked like a wave. They came in rows of armored bodies and flashing weapons, screaming war cries that echoed across the ruined colony. There were hundreds of them. Against them stood 19 Marines, one wounded medic, and a Kravani observer who had never held a weapon in 400 years of life. Sergeant Cole fired the first shot. It struck a Drakshar soldier in the throat, and the alien dropped without a sound. Then the rest of the squad opened fire, and the night exploded into chaos. Valeth pressed himself against a broken wall and watched the humans fight. They moved like water, flowing from cover to cover, always shooting, always killing. When one ran out of ammunition, another covered them while they reloaded. When one was wounded, the others dragged them to safety. Private Grace Lynn was the youngest of them, barely 20 years old, with a face that still held traces of childhood softness. Her hands trembled on her rifle. Her breathing came in short, panicked gasps. Cole noticed. In the middle of a firefight, surrounded by death, she took a moment to put a hand on Lynn's shoulder. "You're doing good, Grace." "I'm scared," Lynn admitted. Her voice was barely a whisper. "So am I." Cole ducked as an energy beam passed over her head. Fear means you're smart enough to understand the danger. Courage is doing your job anyway. And you're doing your job. Lynn swallowed hard. Then she turned back to the fight and kept shooting. The first wave of Drakshar fell back, leaving dozens of bodies behind. But more were coming. Always more. A voice crackled over the radio. It was Lieutenant Nick Barrow, pilot of the shuttle that was supposed to evacuate the civilians. "Cole, I've got bad news. Shuttle took heavy damage on the way down. I can fly, but I can't carry passengers. Not safely." Cole's jaw tightened. "Can you make it back to the Defiance?" "Negative. I've got maybe 5 minutes of flight time before the engines fail." There was a long pause. Then Barrow spoke again, his voice strange and calm. "Amy, there's about 100 of them between you and the ship. I can see them from up here. They're massing for another push. I see them too. If someone were to crash a shuttle into the middle of that formation, it would probably kill most of them. Might give you a window to get the civilians through." The meaning of his words settled over the defenders like a cold wind. Valeth understood immediately. He waited for Cole to refuse, to find another option. She did not refuse. "Nick," she said softly, "you don't have to do this." "Yeah, I do." Barrow's voice was peaceful, almost content. "I always knew I'd die in a cockpit. Amy, always figured it would be something stupid, like a mechanical failure or a bad landing. This is better. This means something. Nick, tell my sister I love her. And tell those colonists. Tell them to live good lives. Make it worth it." The radio clicked off. Valeth looked up and saw the shuttle rising into the dark sky. Its engines were trailing smoke, flames licking at the damaged hull. It should have crashed minutes ago. Barrow was keeping it aloft through sheer will. The Drakshar saw it coming. Some tried to scatter. Most did not move fast enough. The shuttle hit the ground like a meteor. The explosion was blinding. Heat washed over the defenders in a wave that stole the breath from their lungs. When Valeth's vision cleared, he saw a crater where the enemy formation had been. Bodies and debris were scattered across 100 meters. "Move," Cole commanded. "Now, while we have the chance." They ran. The civilians stumbled forward, helped by Marines who ignored their own wounds. The Defiance was visible now, its lights cutting through the smoke and darkness. But the warlord Kethful still stood. He emerged from the chaos, untouched, his armored body having shielded him from the blast. His eyes found the fleeing humans, and his lips curled into something that might have been a smile. "Humans," he bellowed, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "You fight with the desperation of cornered animals. It is almost admirable." Cole pushed the civilians toward the ship. "Keep going. Don't stop." Kethfal raised his massive blade. "I offer you a warrior's choice. Send your strongest to face me in single combat. If they win, I will let the rest of you leave. If they lose, you will all die screaming." "Don't listen to him," Reeves said. "He's just trying to slow us down." But a new voice answered from behind them. "I accept." Commander Jake Harris walked through the defenders like he was taking a stroll through a garden. He had come down from the Defiance, leaving his ship in the hands of his crew. He wore no armor. He carried no rifle. Just a standard sidearm and a combat knife. Valith grabbed his arm. "Commander, this is madness. He will kill you." Harris looked at him with those strange, calm eyes. "Maybe, but my people need time to reach the ship. I have never asked anyone to do something I wouldn't do myself." He walked toward the warlord. Cathful watched him approach with obvious amusement. The Drakshar was twice Harris's size, covered in natural armor, holding a blade that could cut a human in half with a single stroke. "You are their leader?" Cathful asked. "I am." "Then you will die like a leader. On your feet, facing your enemy." The warlord raised his blade. "I will make it quick. You have earned that much." Harris drew his knife. The blade was barely longer than his forearm. It looked like a toy compared to Kethvar's weapon. "Let's find out," Harris said. The warlord attacked. He was fast, impossibly fast for something so large. His blade whistled through the air, missing Harris by inches as the human dove to the side. Kethval followed with a second strike, then a third, each one closer than the last. Harris could not match his strength. He could not match his reach. He could not match his speed. All he could do was survive, dodging and weaving, looking for any opening. He found none. Kethval's blade caught him across the ribs, opening a deep gash that immediately began to pour blood. Harris stumbled, but did not fall. The warlord struck again, slicing his shoulder. Again, cutting his thigh. Valith watched the commander dying by inches. The humans behind him had stopped moving, frozen by the sight of their leader being slowly cut apart. Harris should have fallen. His body was failing, blood loss making his movements sluggish and imprecise. Any normal creature would have collapsed by now, but Harris was not a normal creature. He was human. And humans. Valith was learning, did not know when to stop. The commander's eyes changed. Something ignited behind them, something ancient and terrible and utterly unstoppable. He stopped retreating. He stopped defending. He attacked. His knife found the gap between Kethval's armor plates, sinking into flesh. The warlord roared in surprise and pain. Harris twisted the blade and pulled it free, then stabbed again and again, driving forward with strength that should have been impossible. Kethval swung his massive blade in desperation. It caught Harris in the side, a wound that would have killed most beings instantly. Harris did not stop. He drove his knife into the warlord's throat. Kethval fell, and Commander Jake Harris fell with him. The silence that followed was absolute. Every being on that battlefield, human and Drakshar alike, stood frozen in disbelief. The warlord Kethval, terror of a dozen worlds, lay dead in the dirt. And the human who had killed him lay beside him, drowning in his own blood. Valith was the first to move. He ran to Harris and dropped to his knees beside the commander. The human's face was pale, almost gray, and his breathing came in shallow, rattling gasps. His uniform was more red than blue now. "Commander," Valith said, "stay with me." Harris opened his eyes. They were unfocused, drifting, but somehow he found Valith's face. "The colonists," he whispered. "Are they safe?" Valith looked back. The civilians had reached the Defiance. Marines were helping them up the boarding ramp, carrying the children, supporting the pregnant woman. They were going to make it. "They are safe," Valith said. "You saved them." Harris smiled. It was a small thing, weak and fading, but it transformed his face. All the pain seemed to drain away, replaced by something like peace. "Good," he said. "That's good." His eyes closed. Valeth felt the moment the commander's heart stopped. He felt the last breath leave those broken lungs. 400 years of life had taught him to recognize death when it arrived. But then something impossible happened. A human medic, not Vance, who was barely conscious himself, ran forward and began working on Harris. She pressed her hands to his chest, pumping in a rhythm Valeth did not understand. Another human appeared with medical equipment, injecting something into the commander's neck. "Clear," the medic shouted, and pressed the device to Harris's chest. His body jumped. No pulse. Again. Another shock. Another jump. "Come on, sir. Don't you dare quit on us." A third shock, and Jake Harris gasped back to life. The Drakshar watched this resurrection with something approaching horror. Their warlord was dead. Their army was shattered. And now a human they had killed was refusing to stay dead. They ran. The entire enemy force broke and scattered into the night, fleeing from a single wounded human and a handful of exhausted Marines. They ran like they had seen something that defied the laws of the universe. Perhaps they had. The defenders carried Harris onto the Defiance. The ship lifted off seconds later, its damaged hull screaming as it climbed toward orbit. The other human vessels fell in around it, forming a protective formation as they escaped the planet's gravity. They had done the impossible. 4 ships against a fleet. 30 Marines against an army. And they had won. Valeth sat in the medical bay as the human doctors worked on Harris. The commander was alive, barely, sustained by machines and medicine and the stubborn refusal of his body to give up. He would survive, they said. He would even fly again someday. Valeth did not understand how. He had seen the wounds. He had felt the commander's heart stop. But the humans simply smiled and said that their people were hard to kill. 3 days later, the Kovani fleet returned. Admiral Solorith arrived in his flagship, accompanied by the 12 vessels that had fled at the battle's beginning. They found the human ships waiting in orbit, battered and scarred, but victorious. Solorith demanded an explanation. He received one. Lieutenant Murphy transmitted the combat logs, the footage, the casualty reports. She transmitted the names of the colonists they had saved, and the confession from a captured Drakshar soldier that the enemy fleet had retreated entirely, abandoning the sector in fear of human reinforcements. There were no reinforcements. There was only the Defiance and its sister ships. But the Drakshar did not know that. Silorth was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with something Valeth recognized as shame. "We abandoned them," the admiral said. "We left them to die, and they won anyway." "Yes," Valeth replied. "They did." A week later, Valeth stood before the Kovani High Command. The chamber was vast and ancient, filled with representatives from 100 worlds. They had gathered to hear his report on humanity. He spoke for 3 hours. He told them about the retreat that the humans refused. He told them about the charge into impossible odds. He told them about Marines who volunteered to die for strangers and a pilot who turned his own death into a weapon. He told them about a medic who kept working while bleeding out and a young private who fought through her fear. And he told them about Commander Jake Harris, who walked into single combat against a monster and won through nothing but will. When he finished, the chamber was silent. "What is your recommendation?" The High Chancellor asked finally. "Should humanity be admitted to the Galactic Accord?" Valeth thought about the question carefully. He thought about everything he had witnessed on Malo 7. He thought about the dead and the survivors. He thought about those 2 children, Lila and Max, who were alive because humans had refused to leave them behind. "Humanity should not merely be admitted to the Accord," Valeth said. We should thank whatever gods exist that they want to be our friends rather than our enemies." He paused, letting his next words settle into the silence. I saw humans rise in battle. I watched them do things that should have been impossible. They are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the smartest or the oldest or the most advanced. But they have something that we do not. Something I cannot name or quantify. It is the thing that makes them stand when they should fall. It is the thing that makes them fight for strangers. It is the thing that makes them love so fiercely that they would burn themselves to ash rather than abandon their own. Valeth looked at the assembled representatives. These powerful beings who ruled entire star systems. "I felt the stars tremble when I watched them fight," he said. "And I believe the Corvani should be grateful, deeply grateful, that humans call us friends rather than enemies." The vote was unanimous. Humanity was admitted to the Galactic Accord that same day. A month later, Valeth visited Harris in a human hospital on Earth. The commander was sitting up in bed, bandages still covering half his body, arguing with a nurse about being allowed to walk. "You're supposed to rest," the nurse said firmly. "I've been resting for weeks. I'm going insane." Then go insane lying down. Harris saw Valeth in the doorway and waved him in. The nurse threw her hands up and left, muttering about stubborn patience. "Valeth." Harris smiled that warm, easy smile. "I heard your report convinced the council. It was not difficult. Your actions spoke for themselves." Harris shrugged, then winced at the movement. "We just did what anyone would do." "No." Valeth sat in the chair beside the bed. "You did what humans do. It is not the same thing." They talked for hours. About the battle, about the future, about the strange friendship that had formed between an ancient Corvani observer and a human commander who refused to die. Finally, as the sun set outside the window, Harris asked the question that had been waiting between them. "What did you really write in that report?" Valeth considered lying. He decided against it. "I wrote the truth," he said. "I wrote that humans are terrifying. Not because of your weapons or your technology, but because of your hearts. I wrote that you love too fiercely and fight too hard and never, ever know when to stop." Harris laughed. It hurt him. Valeth could see that, but he laughed anyway. "Is that a compliment or a warning?" "Both." Valeth stood and offered his hand in the human fashion. "It is both." Harris took his hand and shook it firmly. An alien and a human. Former strangers. Now friends. The stars still trembled when humans rose in battle. But at least now, Valeth knew he would be standing beside them when they did.